the top. There was a long corridor from which opened many doorways. One, directly behind us, was tight closed. If we could open it and pass into the chamber behind, we might find a respite from attack. The remaining lions were roaring horribly. I saw one sneaking very slowly up the stairs toward us. "Try that door," I called to Victory. "See if it will open." She ran up to it and pushed. "Turn the knob," I cried, seeing that she did not know how to open a door, but neither did she know what I meant by knob. I put a bullet in the spine of the approaching lion and leapt to Victory's side. The door resisted my first efforts to swing it inward. Rusted hinges and swollen wood held it tightly closed. But at last it gave, and just as another lion mounted to the top of the stairway, it swung in, and I pushed Victory across the threshold. Then I turned to meet the renewed attack of the savage foe. One lion fell in his tracks, another stumbled to my very feet, and then I leapt within and slammed the portal to. A quick glance showed me that this was the only door to the small apartment in which we had found sanctuary, and with a sigh of relief I leaned for a moment against the panels of the stout barrier that separated us from the rampaging demons without. Across the room, between two windows, stood a flat-topped desk. A little pile of white and brown lay upon it close to the opposite edge. After a moment of rest, I crossed the room to investigate. The white was the bleached human bones, the skull, collarbones, arms, and a few of the upper ribs of a man. The brown was the dust of a decayed military cap and blouse. In a chair before the desk were other bones, while more still strewed the floor beneath the desk and about the chair. The man had died sitting there with his face buried in his arms 200 years ago. Beneath the desk were a pair of spurred military boots, green and rotten with decay. In them were the leg bones of a man. Among the tiny bones of the hands was an ancient fountain pen, as good, apparently, as the day it was made, and a metal-covered memoranda book closed over the bones of an index finger. It was a gruesome sight, a pitiful sight, this lone inhabitant of mighty London. I picked up the metal-covered memoranda book. Its pages were rotten and stuck together. Only here and there was a sentence or a part of a sentence legible. The first that I could read was near the middle of the little volume. "His Majesty left for Tunbridge Wells today. He, Jesty, was stricken today. God give she does not die. Am military governor of Lon." And farther on, "It is awful. 100 deaths today, worse than the bombardment." Nearer the end, I picked out the following: "I promised his Maj. E. will find me here when he ret alone." The most legible passage was on the next page. "Thank God we drove them out. There is not a single man on British soil today, but at what awful cost. I tried to persuade Sir Philip to urge the people to remain, but they are mad with fear of the death, and rage at our enemies. He tells me that the coast cities are packed, waiting to be taken across. What will become of England, with none left to rebuild her shattered cities?" And the last entry: "Alone, only the wild beasts." A lion is roaring now beneath the palace windows. I think the people feared the beasts even more than they did the death. But they are gone, all gone. And to what? How much better conditions will they find on the continent? All gone. Only I remain. I promised his Majesty, and when he returns he will find that I was true to my trust, for I shall be awaiting him. God save the King." That was all. This brave and forever nameless officer died nobly at his post, true to his country and his king. It was the death no doubt, that took him. Some of the entries had been dated. From the few legible letters and figures which remained, I judge the end came sometime in August 1937, but of that I am not at all certain. The diary has cleared up at least one mystery that had puzzled me not a little, and now I am surprised that I had not guessed its solution myself. The presence of African and Asiatic beasts in England. Acclimated by years of confinement in the zoological gardens, they were fitted to resume in England the wild existence for which nature had intended them, and once free, had evidently bred prolifically, in marked contrast to the captive exotics of 20th century Pan America, which had gradually become fewer until extinction occurred some time during the 21st century. The palace, if such it was, lay not far from the banks of the Thames. The room in which we were imprisoned overlooked the river, and I determined to attempt to escape in this direction. To descend through the palace was out of the question, but outside we could discover no lions. The stems of the ivy which clambered upward past the window of the room were as large around as my arm. I knew that they would support our weight, and as we could gain nothing by remaining longer in the palace, I decided to descend by way of the ivy and follow along down the river in the direction of the launch. Naturally, I was much handicapped by the presence of the girl, but I could not abandon her, though I had no idea what I should do with her after rejoining my companions. That she would prove a burden and an embarrassment I was certain, but she had made it equally plain to me that she would never return to her people to mate with Buckingham. I owed my life to her, and, all other considerations aside, that was sufficient demand upon my gratitude and my honor to necessitate my suffering every inconvenience in her service. 2. She was Queen of England, but by far the most potent argument in her favor, she was a woman in distress, and a young and very beautiful one. And so, though I wished 1,000 times that she was back in her camp, I never let her guess it, but did all that lay within my power to serve and protect her. I thank God now that I did so. With the lion still padding back and forth beyond the closed door, Victory and I crossed the room to one of the windows. I had outlined my plan to her, and she had assured me that she could descend the ivy without assistance. In fact, she smiled a trifle at my question. Swinging myself outward, I began the descent, and had come to within a few feet of the ground, being just opposite a narrow window, when I was startled by a savage growl almost in my ear, and then a great taloned paw darted from the aperture to seize me, and I saw the snarling face of a lion within the embrasure. Releasing my hold upon the ivy, I dropped the remaining distance to the ground, saved from laceration only because the lion's paw struck the thick stem of ivy. The creature was making a frightful racket now, leaping back and forth from the floor at the broad window ledge, tearing at the masonry with his claws in vain attempts to reach me. But the opening was too narrow, and the masonry too solid. Victory had commenced the descent, but I called to her to stop just above the window, and as the lion reappeared, growling and snarling, I put a .33 bullet in his face, and at the same moment Victory slipped quickly past him, dropping into my upraised arms that were awaiting her. The roaring of the beasts that had discovered us, together with the report of my rifle, had set the balance of the fierce inmates of the palace into the most frightful uproar I had ever heard. I feared that it would not be long before intelligence or instinct would draw them from the interiors and set them upon our trail, the river. Nor had we much more than reached it when a lion bounded around the corner of the edifice we had just quitted and stood looking about as though in search of us. Following came others, while Victory and I crouched in hiding behind a clump of bushes close to the bank of the river. The beasts sniffed about the ground for a while, but they did not chance to go near the post where we had stood beneath the window that had given us escape. Presently a black-maned male raised his head, and with cocked ears and glaring eyes.